So let's get started with thinking about multiplication of decimals, and here we're going to multiply numbers up to the hundredths place. The first thing we are going to think about is how we could use the traditional algorithm to help students understand multiplication of these decimals right here, 2 3/10 times 1 4/10. Let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things we want to do is draw vertical lines to separate the place values. And then we're going to multiply the tenths of the second factor times the tenths of the first. So here 4/10 times 3/10 would be 12/10. So I'll go ahead and write that on my problem just like that. Now then I'm going to multiply the tenths of the second factor times the ones of the first. So now I'm multiplying 4/10 times 2, and then I have to add in that regrouped 1. So when I do that multiplication there, I have 9/10. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the number of decimal places in the two factors, starting from the right of the product, and I'm going to count that number of places and place in the decimal point. So I'll go ahead and put in my decimal point there. And if I wanted to show this 92 hundredths, I could do that with my base 10 blocks. Now we're going to go ahead and hold place value by placing an X or a 0 beneath the tens column there. I'm going to use a 0 in this example. And then it's time to do a little bit more multiplication. Now we're going to multiply the ones of the second factor times the tenths of the first. So that ends up with 3/10. And then I'm going to multiply the ones of the second factor times the ones of the first. So 1 times 2 is 2. So I'll go ahead and write that right there. And if I wanted to put in my decimal point, I've got it there, and I could show it with my base 10 blocks. Now it's time to figure out our product. Let's add those numbers together. When I do add those together, that is 3 22 hundredths, and I could show that addition with those base 10 blocks just to confirm my response, and I would have to do a regrouping there if I was using those base 10 blocks. So now let's look at this example for the partial products algorithm. Here I'm going to draw vertical lines to separate the place values, and then I'm going to multiply the ones of the second factor times the ones of the first factor. 2 times 1, or 1 times 2, is 2, and I could show that with those two $1 bills. Then I'm going to multiply the ones of the second factor times the tenths of the first factor. 1 times 3/10 equals 3/10, so I could show that with 3 dimes. Then I'll multiply the tenths of the second factor times the ones of the first factor. So there 4/10 times 2 is 8/10. I could show that with 8 dimes. And then I'm going to multiply the tenths of the second factor times the tenths of the first. There 4/10 times 3/10 would equal 12 hundredths, and I can show that with 1 dime and 2 pennies. Now it's time to add those partial products together. Total, I have $3.22 because I have to do some regrouping. I regroup 10 dimes for $1 bill, and then when I add all of my money together, you can see that I have $3.22 or 3 22 hundredths as my product. Now we can use money, or we could use a graphic organizer to help students use this partial products algorithm. You could also use place value discs or base 10 blocks. There's a lot of different ways that we can do this, but I wanted to show an example where we set this up in an array. So I have a 2-digit times a 2-digit number, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up just like this in a rectangle that has 2 columns and 2 rows. And then I'm going to write my factors in expanded form. So here I have 2 3/10, and I'm going to multiply that by 1 4/10. Now it's time for us to do our, I'll scoot to the side so you can see that. Now it's time for us to do our multiplication, just as we did before. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3/10 equals 3/10. 4/10 times 2 is 8/10. And then 4/10 times 3/10 is 12 hundredths. Now what did I do there? These are all of my partial products. And if I add those together, let's see, 2 plus 8/10 is 2 8/10, plus another 3/10, that would be 3 1/10, plus 12 hundredths. That would be a final product of 3 and 22 hundredths. So just another way that we can help support students as they think about this multiplication of decimals. This time I used my partial products and I presented it within an array to help make the multiplication, I would say, organized, and maybe for some students just a bit easier. So we just looked at an example where we thought about base 10 blocks and money. You could also use the place value discs here, or you could also think about using different graphic organizers like we also just did. But all of these are tools that could help students with their multiplication of decimals. So I'd like you to push pause and think about which tools would you use to support students as they work on multiplication with decimals in your classroom.